Bills Mafia, what's going on? It's DM3, the owner and founder of Built in Buffalo. So we're doing a little pop-up show tonight. I hope you guys Wednesdays are going well. I got my guy Scott and my guy Papa Ron. We're going to break down the Bills roster. It's kind of like a roster primer. We're going to talk about Bills pending free agents. Then we're going to talk about 4, potentially 5 guys that we can see as extension candidates. So we're going to jump right into this. I made a list of 16 guys that are Bills unrestricted free agents. I do have one restricted free agent. So Scott, I sent you the list. Where do you want to start? The floor is yours. You pick a guy. We'll talk about it. We'll dissect it. We'll break it down.
Yeah, I think probably the most polarizing guy on the list, and a guy that a lot of people probably want us to talk about, Amari Cooper. Traded for him in the middle of the season, gave up a third-round pick for him, got injured really early. I think his second game he got injured. We never really got to see what he can do, and it never really felt like he fully got ingrained in the offense. Personally, I don't think that I want him to come back. It would have to be at a right price, but I think that he's a guy that I'm sure a lot of people want to come back. They think he could be a number one. He's on the wrong age of 30. He's coming off the worst age of his career, or worst season of his career. He's coming off a wrist injury. So Amari Cooper is who I want to start with, and I'm going to say I don't want him back.
Papa Ron, you agree, disagree?
I disagree. I would like to
Here
see.
we go.
I would love to see what Amari Cooper can do in this offense with a full offseason, learning the scheme, and with Josh Allen building that chemistry. I do understand he's on the wrong side of 30. Is he on a decline? I don't know, but if the price is right, I'm not saying throw number one wide receiver money at him by no means, but if they can get him on a fair deal, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think too, like I'm kind of 50-50 on Amari Cooper. I do feel like we didn't see Amari Cooper. We saw a guy who came over midway through the season, dealt with a wrist injury. Now, towards the end of the year, I did see him have some issues with separation. I don't know if that's the wide receiver fall off. I mean, it's not like he's 34, 35. He's 30. So I would like to see what he looks like in a full offseason program with the Bills. I just don't know what that price tag is because, like Ron, like you said, I'm not willing to pay him, you know, over 10 million a year. I think that's too much. If you can get him to come back and he is that guy that he says he was just happy to be here and happy to be part of the ride, and he just wants to win at this stage of his career. If you can get him for 2 years, 12 mil, something like that, 2 years, 13 million, and I don't know if he's going to take that. I'm just saying, I think around there, but you have to remember how much you're paying Curtis Samuel, right? And I bring up Curtis Samuel because towards the end of the season, I think he was integrated more into the offense. I think that's more of what we're going to see. A lot of fans weren't happy with the production of Curtis Samuel. Towards the end of the year, you saw him be sprinkled in a little bit more. I mean, he had the big touchdown in the Chiefs game. He had another touchdown, that big one against the Broncos. So if we're already paying somebody, you know, that $8 to $9 million range, is that something that Bean wants to do? Obviously, we got good news that the salary cap went up a little bit this year. So I'm a guy who likes to see what's going on in free agency, and if there's something that's just not there, and Bean doesn't want to overpay, then maybe they bring Cooper back on a team friendly deal. And again, I don't know if he's willing to do that, but I'd be all for it if he's willing to do that, to come back. And because I don't think he just fell off a cliff. I feel like there's some value there, and I feel like you can still get some good production out of him. All right, Ron, you're next up. You got the list. We'll take Cooper off. Who's the next guy that you want to talk about that's an unrestricted free agent for the Bills?
Well, let's stick with wide receivers. Go with Mac Hollins. Um, I think the vibe that he brings to the team, we heard that all season long, that the Mac Hollins is a vibe, right? I think he's great for that locker room. I think he certainly built a chemistry with Josh Allen and a connection there. And I would love to see him back. Just the locker room presence that he brings, the effort on the field, and I mean, I love his pregame antics, coming in dressed up the way he is and things like that. It's a lot of fun. Gives us something to talk about. I love Mac Hollins, and I put out a short not too long ago apologizing openly to Mac Hollins because I did not want him here when he first signed. And it was because he bounced around from team to team to team and he never really latched on anywhere. So I had my doubts about him, but he proved me wrong, and I'd love to have him back.
Scott, what do you think,
Yeah,
man?
I agree. He's a guy that I want back, and not just because he's my close personal friend. Lance and I got to meet him before the Ravens playoff game. He showed up to our tailgate, shook our hands, took a picture. Seemed like a really nice guy. But yeah, he's the kind of guy that you need. He isn't going to make a ton of money. We can probably get him back for 2-3 mil again. He plays special teams. He loves special teams. He blocks. I think Khalil Shakir said he buys him a pizza from Imperial every Tuesday because he blocks for him on screens every week. And
Right.
he's just a dog. Like, he talks shit. He's going to get in your face. He's going to let you know. He's going to step over you. Like when he stepped over like AI on Pat Surtain, the defensive player of the year, the touchdown he caught in the playoff game. He was the only receiver we had who showed up for the playoff game. He was receiver 4 or 5. So
Right.
yeah, I'd love to have him back. It seems like he wants to be here. He bought right into the culture. He's just one of those guys you need, that you hate him if you're playing against him, and you love him if he's on your team. Kind of like a Pat Beverly, to give a basketball reference.
He is what we thought Trent Sherfield was going to be last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what Bean wanted, a big guy that could block, go up and get contested balls. Not going to be your number 1, number 2, number 3 per se, but he's a guy that can get you a catch that's reliable when you need it. And obviously we saw that in the Chiefs game in the divisional last year. Like, there was nobody that was helping Josh, right, except for Khalil Shakir. So I think we all Googled him when we signed him. I think some of us knew of him, but we weren't familiar with exactly what kind of role he played as a wide receiver. It was one of those things I said in our group chat that, he's a special teams guy. Let's not freak out that he's the first guy we sign in free agency because it's a special teams move. Was he a special teams guy? Absolutely. I mean, you saw the hit in the Broncos game. But like you guys both said, the vibe that he brings, I think that lifts up a lot of those other guys in the locker room. He's now going to be one of the vet presences in that wide receiver room. He led the team in receiving touchdowns, believe it or not, with 5. He was a guy that Josh loves, that over the middle slant route, and it seems like whenever he wanted it, he got it from Mac Hollins. That's just one of those routes that Josh loves, and he's dependable. I think we were watching, and I know Scott, me and you, I know for a fact, and we were talking about this during the Texans game. It's like, can we please stop throwing the deep ball to Mac Hollins? Sure enough, next week Brandon Beane goes and gets Amari Cooper, and Amari Cooper doesn't have this massive impact on the roster, and here we are, in the postseason, and he's throwing the ball to Mac Hollins, and I'm okay with it because he's gonna have a reliable catch. I absolutely think you bring Mac back, and I think you bring him back to not just be that leader in the locker room, but he's a culture guy, right? Everybody loves him. He does good. I just saw something that he was at the Special Olympics, doing good in the community. So I absolutely think that he's a necessity to bring back, just for what he brings to Josh. I think Josh trusts him, and I think that's what we need going into the future when we're uncertain about what the rest of this wide receiver room looks like, because we need a vertical threat and we need some other stuff. So, all right, so we'll move on. I'm going to talk about Ty Johnson. He's my guy that I thought that I should bring up, and I think that he is a guy that we cannot let leave in free agency unless he prices himself out of Buffalo. I'm not sure what Brandon Beane has on him for a price tag value-wise for what he is, but he's got Josh Allen's full support, coming out and saying after a game that he's the best third down back in the NFL. We saw him just completely take over the Lions game, where it seemed like Joe Brady had plays dialed up for Ty Johnson because James Cook wasn't getting those plays. Ray Davis wasn't getting those play designs. And I think having a 1-2-3 punch of what the Bills have with James Cook, Ray Davis, and Ty Johnson, I think it might be one of the best, if not top 3 running back rooms in the league. They're just all very complementary to each other. And Ty Johnson, he's a great dude. Like, he seems like he's another culture fit. So, Scott, what do you think about Ty Johnson?
Yeah, I absolutely want him back. It showed how much they trusted him in the Chiefs game, the AFC Championship game, right or wrong. But he was on the field for the last drive of the game like he was all year. Given the game James Cook was having, we still went Ty Johnson because that's how much they trust him. He's the 2-minute, 4-minute third down back. He's the receiving back. He's the guy who blocks. He also plays special teams. He can return kicks. Him and Codrington were back there. Him, Ray Davis, and Codrington were back there returning a lot of kicks this season. So yeah, I want him back. I don't think he'll be crazy expensive. Maybe I think we gave him like 1.2 million this past 1.125.
He was
Brandon
pretty
Beane's,
close to league minimum. Yeah, he was pretty close.
Yeah, Brandon Beane's favorite numbers where it doesn't formulate into the comp pick
1.1
formula.
mil.
That's right. So I think he comes back. Maybe we bump him up. Maybe we give him a second year to keep him around. And it also seems like he really likes it here. His wife had to sign like, "Thank you, Jets, for cutting us," because he got to come to Buffalo. He was damn near out of the league if the Bills don't bring him in last season. He was on the practice squad, and then Joe Brady takes over and he plays that first Jets game and he scores a touchdown. It's like, we've had this guy all year. Like, why haven't we been using him? And he seems to fit in really well in the Joe Brady offense. So yeah, I think I want him back. He's affordable, he's trustworthy, and he has the ability to put up 100 yards either on the ground or through the air for a number 3 running back. Those don't grow on trees.
Right. And it's and Ron, I'll let you go here in a second. It's crazy to me to think about Ty Johnson as a guy who was having a tough time making a roster when you find a guy like Joe Brady, and even Ken Dorsey used him, I think, fairly, I feel like. But to find a guy that just, this is what I need for you to do on third down, I need you to just go in the flat and catch a pass. And like, he trusts him over James Cook and Ray Davis. And that's I think that says something. And I'm just concerned. And like you said, I don't think he's going to warrant a ton of money, but there's always teams that might want to, throw, 2 years, $7 million at him. I don't know if that's for what the Bills want to use him as, if that's something that Brandon Beane's willing to do. So, Papa Ron, what do you think, man?
Yeah, I like Ty Johnson a lot. It's funny you mentioned when Joe Brady took over. I remember that first touchdown that he scored, and thinking, who is that? I don't recognize it. Is that Devin Singletary come back? What? um, but yeah, I like Ty Johnson, and I think, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about James Cook here later on. But Ty Johnson is kind of part of one of the reasons why I feel the way I do about Cook. I love the Bills running back room. I think a lot of it though is built around this offensive line. You know, Dave, we've talked about the Bills from back in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
That's why they were so good, was that offensive line was fantastic. And I think it's a big part of it. So, but I think as far as this offense goes, the more you can keep these guys together, it's going to be pay dividends down the road.
I agree. All right, so Scott, you're up, man. Who's on your list that we haven't covered yet?
Let's switch it over to the defensive side. Let's go Rasul Douglas. He's another guy. I think, what is he, 30, 31? Like Amari Cooper on the wrong. Yeah, that's right.
Here's a guy
on the wrong side of 30. Was awesome. Another guy we traded a third round pick for last season. Came in and played great. What do you have? 2 or 3 interceptions after he came over. Like, instantly became the number 1. And then this year I was kind of disappointed. I know he was banged up at times, but it didn't really seem like he was the same guy. I am okay with letting him go. I think we probably only have it in the budget to highly pay 1 cornerback this offseason, and I don't think it's Rasul Douglas. So I think it's a guy we're going to talk about later. So I'm cool with letting him walk.
Ron, what do you think, man?
This one's tough for me. I like Rasul Douglas, and I'm not sure that this year was a fall off due to age or if it was just for whatever reason he struggled at times. To me, there's bigger issues on the defensive side, namely up front, than what we're seeing in the secondary. I think more than likely Cole Bishop takes over at the safety position. So if you can, again, I go back to the continuity thing, and the longer these guys are together, the better they're going to be in the long run. And if you can get Douglas back again, going back to the fair deal conversation, if you can get that done, I'd really rather spend the extra money on that defensive line. So I'm fine with bringing Douglas back if they can make those improvements elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and I don't know where he's at as far as what he's going to warrant on the market, but I didn't see, in, like Scott said, I didn't see the production that we got. Now, the cornerback position is always a tricky position. Like, if you look at Christian Benford, he didn't have the interceptions and all this stuff to put him in the defensive player of the year, top conversation. But that means if we weren't hearing his name, that's good because people weren't throwing anywhere near him because he was doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's shutting down opposing number 1 or number 2 receivers. I felt like with Rasul Douglas, he kind of took a step backwards in the fact of he was pretty reliable in the run defense. I thought that he was very physical when it came to being able to stop the run, but I feel like he lost the step when it was having to keep up with bigger receivers that were faster. I feel like he just kind of struggled there, and we saw it. We saw it down the stretch. We saw it in crucial games where it's like, who's tackling that? It's Rasul Douglas. Who's tackling that? Oh, it's Rasul Douglas making the tackle on a big play. Like I'd love to have him back, like Ron said, for continuity, but I want them to reset the position personally. I think that they will sign somebody in free agent. It's going to be, I hate calling them bargain bin guys, but I feel like Ron said, you need to spend your money up front, which is going to help take care of the back seven. I feel like if you spend your money to get better up front, that's going to allow your guys better in coverage. It looks like the Bills are going more towards some more man. So if there's a corner out there on day 2 that you can get, that's going to come in, and let's be done with Kyer. And not to go off on a tangent, but let's be done with Kyer Elam. That project is over. Send him to a team that wants a young physical guy that maybe they can mold into something that we just haven't gotten in 3 years. But I think we need to get younger at the position, and I think that comes through the draft. Let that person fight out with, somebody we bring in when the league year opens, the $2-3 million guy, veteran, unless Bean wants to go out and spend money, but I don't think he does. So that's where I'm at with Rasul Douglas. I don't think he's willing to take this is probably going to be his last contract. So I don't think he's going to be willing to take a team friendly type deal. And I don't know the guy personally, but I know sometimes during the season, I felt like he was a little bit negative towards the media. I don't know if you guys felt the same way. There was a couple times when they were doing locker room interviews and he was saying, you guys thought we couldn't stop the run and you guys thought that we couldn't play man, and he was doing this and that. And I don't know if that's just him being in his own head, but like I said, let's get younger at the position and let's keep it moving. All right, Papa Ron, you're up, man. On the list, who's left that you want to discuss that we don't need to spend like 20 seconds on, that we can spend a good chunk of time on?
You guys want to help me out because I'm on my phone now, and so all the notes are on my phone, and I can't.
Papa
I
Ron
can't
was
touch
having
anything.
some technical difficulties. How about Dwayne Smoot?
Okay.
You go there.
You know what? When it comes to the defensive line, Javon Solomon can stay. Ed Oliver can stay. Gregory Rousseau can stay. The rest of them, as far as I'm concerned, they can go. Rebuild
Wow.
this defensive line
Shots
completely.
fired.
I've watching them. So going all the way back to week 4 of this season, I mentioned it. I wrote about it that if the defensive line doesn't improve, it's going to be the Achilles heel of this team in the playoffs. And sure enough, that's what happened. They've got to fix this defensive line. They've got to, I don't care. Like I said, they can completely blow it up and start over, keep those 3 guys I mentioned. So if they want to kick the rest of them to the curb, I have no problem with that.
Scott, what do you think, man?
I would like to bring him back if it's for like the minimum and he's not guaranteed that he's making the team. If he's okay with those stipulations, then I think he's worth coming back because he can play inside, he can play outside. You're not going to ask him to play heavy snaps. And he got injured midway through the season. We felt like wrist injuries were contagious in that locker room for one point. So before he got hurt, he was playing.
You think it's a coincidence that they got rid of one of the strength and conditioning guys?
Not a coincidence.
I do not. Yeah, if he can come back and it's, that minimum, that 1.1, 1.2 million, and he's, maybe he makes the team, maybe he doesn't. He has to earn a spot, kind of like it was this season. He wasn't guaranteed a spot. I'd be okay with him coming back, but I don't think I want him to be one of the heavy rotation guys next season. But, the end 4 or 5 guy who can play both spots, wouldn't hate it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's. Go ahead, Ron.
I just wanted to say really, I can't stand the rotation of McDermott.
None of us.
It is questionable.
None of us. That's why we don't ever have double-digit sack guys.
Yeah.
Now Rousseau could have had double-digit sacks. I mean, he was what, 3rd or 2nd in the NFL in pressures or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But it goes all the way back to when Jerry Hughes was still here. like they just don't get double-digit sack guys because they only play 45 to 50% of the snaps, and it's frustrating.
Yeah. Sorry. I should throw that in there.
All right, so I'm going to sift through some of the stuff. I think we'll all agree that it doesn't really matter on these players. So Austin Johnson, I know where Papa Ron stands on Austin Johnson, Jordan Phillips, and Quentin Jefferson because they're all defensive tackles, and I feel like Austin Johnson maybe because if he's a team-friendly deal guy, bring him to camp, fine.
Led the team in interceptions.
Yeah, right. That's crazy weird that a defensive tackle led the Bills. Kareem Jackson, who's he's like 96 years old. I'm pretty sure he's either going to retire or he probably won't come back. Will Clapp, offensive lineman. I don't know if they'll bring him back or not. He was a guy that was up, down, inactive, up, down. He's a good guy for what he is. Can play backup center and some other offensive line positions. This guy doesn't register it doesn't move the needle for me. And then unfortunately, Tommy Doyle retired due to some health concerns. But he did have a big man touchdown in the playoff game against the Patriots. So that leaves, I'm going to try to get to, so Reed Ferguson, I feel like that's a no-brainer. He should probably come back. I don't think we ever want to have to worry about snaps. He had the one against the Rams, I believe it was the Rams game where he just got completely blown up and they blocked that punt. But other than that, his snaps are spot on. And side note, I feel like the Bills' special teams are perfect the way they are. Say what you want about Sam Martin, but I think that he's arguably one of the best holders in the NFL, if not the best. We don't ever have any issues with snaps and holds. It's if T-Bass can make it or not, pretty much. So, all right. So a couple left that are kind of interesting here. Quentin Morris is a restricted free agent. How do you guys feel about Quentin Morris? And Papa Ron, I'll go to you first on this one.
I go back to the continuity of the offense. The offense set records this year. I know a lot of people they want more speed and things like that, which is totally understandable. But I am fine bringing this offense back together and keeping them there. Yeah, I mean that's really all there's. He doesn't do a whole heck of a lot as far as scoring or moving the chains or anything like that. But just to keep everybody together, I'm for it.
Scott, what do you think, man?
I agree. He knows the system. He does his job. He plays special teams when you need him. Josh is familiar with him. It's not like he's going to be crazy expensive. He's going to be on whatever kind of minimum. He's a MAC guy. Soft spot in my heart for the MAC guys or small school guys. And he doesn't score many touchdowns, but the ones he do seem to be big ones. He had the game winner against the Giants. He had a big one against the Dolphins this year on that crazy Josh play. I'm fine with him coming back. I like Quentin as our tight end 3.
Okay, so how about this comment right here? Zach David said, how do you feel about Zach Davidson?
I liked him in the preseason. He only got, he called up 3 times. He had 1 catch for 8 yards or something like that. Like he's fine. I don't see any reason. I don't know if we would never have him be like a receiving tight end, which is probably what he's the best at. We already have one of those, 1.5 of those, because Dawson Knox can do it too. So I don't know if we want our tight end 3, who we would only have to come in really for mostly blocking situations, to be more of a receiving threat. So I don't know if he has a best role here. I think he'll make a team somewhere next year where he can be more of like a tight end 2, but I don't think for a tight end 3, he's like the type we would want.
Right. And my opinion on Quentin Morris is, I mean, if it like you guys both basically said, if it's not broken, don't fix it. He knows the system. I think Josh trusts him in some situations. You're not going to use him a ton. He's going to be more of a blocking guy. And I mean, they just re-signed Alec Anderson, so they're going. They went heavy last year with the 6 linemen, more than any team in the league. So I think that is a direct correlation, and hear me out on this, and I might go down a tangent here, but I think using the 6 offensive linemen is a direct correlation of what Brandon Beane said about Dalton Kincaid not being strong enough, because you have guys out there like Mac Hollins, who is a hell of a blocker, which is what we wanted in Gabe Davis. And then you have Dawson Knox, who I believe is the best blocking tight end on the team, and it's not close. So that 6 offensive line, I don't know if that's a Joe Brady special or if that's just like, hey, we need big dudes to block. So I don't know if that's a direct correlation there or not, but it was interesting how Brendan Bean talked about Dalton Kincaid and having to get bigger and stronger. And I feel the same sentiment about Keon Coleman. I feel like that dude needs to hit the weight room, needs to get a little bigger and stronger. All right, so I'm going to pose one of these guys on you. There's 2 left. So one guy's probably not everybody ever really thinks about. He's just kind of there. Reggie Gilliam, fullback / tight end / fullback / tight end / fullback. Scott, how do you feel about Reggie Gilliam?
Very similar to Quentin Morris. I would like to have him back if this offense seems to have a need for a fullback, like H-back type person. And if we're going to have one, it might as well be the guy who's been here, also a MAC guy like them. I would like to see Reggie back. But again, am I going to be heartbroken if he leaves? No. But for the same reason I like Quentin Morris, I like Reggie Gilliam. Come in, knows the system, does his job, plays special teams. We love those guys. So, yeah, I think Reggie probably finds his way home.
Papa Ron, what do you think, man?
I don't have much more to add. That's spot on. I agree. He's like Reed Ferguson, Quentin Morris. They have a job they do, and you don't really hear about them, which is good.
All right, so here's where I'm going to lay some info down, and I'm sure you guys both have seen some of the same things that I've seen. If you watch when James Cook breaks runs to the outside, Reggie Gilliam is a catalyst to a lot of that. Now, I'm not saying that you can't go get a fullback anywhere you want, free agency, undrafted free agent, whatever. But I feel like, again, if it's not broken, don't try to fix it. I feel like Reggie Gilliam was a huge catalyst for a lot of what the Bills did on the ground this year. And if I just went back and watched a few games throughout the season, because basically we're going to talk about James Cook in a minute. And I was basically looking at a lot of James Cook just because I'm trying to put something together for like a film study thing. And Reggie Gilliam is a catalyst. We talk about the 6 offensive linemen, but Reggie Gilliam sets so many openings and so many angles for Cook. Now Cook's got to hit the holes and he's got to have the vision and all that stuff. But I think he's a huge part of what the Bills do in the running game. And I think
saw
that
a stat. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm pretty 99% sure the stat is accurate. I'm going to say it because I said it during the Ravens game. But everybody talks about the Ravens and Patrick Ricard and how they can have 7 300-pound guys out there. When the Bills go 6 offensive linemen and a fullback, they average more yards a carry than the Ravens do when they do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot saying for Reggie Gilliam because he's the fullback. He's the lead blocker if they're in any kind of ISO play. So what the Ravens are known for, the Bills are better at it.
Yeah, whenever they do a pulling scheme, obviously they're going to have that 6th lineman. He's going to be out in front, right? Obviously they're going to bring a 315-pound guy, excuse me, out in front. But a lot of the times too, like Reggie Gilliam will just be there. He's the guy, like you see James Cook, and then like a safety, or he's hitting a linebacker, or a block is being taken by Reggie Gilliam. And I feel like he's a good part of what the Bills do. And I think that he's a Joe Brady guy, honestly, because you see how Joe Brady balanced the offense, with the 30 touchdowns passing, 30 touchdowns rushing, how it was so balanced throughout the season. And I'll even take it a step further. And I think that there's an uptick in the run game this season. I feel like that's Sean McDermott, what he wanted from Brian Daboll all along. And I feel like Joe Brady knows we have mismatches, right? If we're going to run an RPO and you have to either figure out if James Cook has the ball or if Josh is going to keep it and do something with it, like that's a huge deal. So I like Reggie Gilliam. I think he's back. I think it's a no-brainer to bring him back, and I think he's a huge part of what the Bills do. All right, last one. Damar Hamlin. How do we feel about Damar Hamlin? And Papa Ron, I'll go to you first on this one.
Yeah, I like.
This is a safe space, by the way, Papa Ron. This is a safe space.
Yeah, the story with Hamlin, obviously, we all know it. It's a fantastic story. It's amazing. They'll make a movie out of it someday, I'm sure. I think the athleticism that somebody like a Cole Bishop brings to the field is needed. It is difficult to say that Hamlin can move on just because of the the emotional part of it, I guess. But if they don't re-sign him, I'm okay with it. The only thing that I do question maybe is if is Bishop ready for that particular role, because the way the Bills use their safeties, I think, is a little different than a lot of teams. They're interchangeable. Oftentimes, we heard Hyde and Poyer talk about that all the time. I even remember a quote from Coach Belichick years ago that he said one of the most difficult things about the Bills defense is their ability to disguise and interchange their coverages and stuff. So you get that kind of compliment from one of the best defensive minds that in the league that we've had. Cam Bishop take that spot. I think his athleticism doesn't make up for maybe necessarily the lack of experience, but I definitely think it helps until as he can gain that experience. I even like this past season, I would have liked to have seen him more so he can accelerate that learning curve. But if DeMar Hamlin wants a certain amount of money that the Bills aren't willing to give him, I'm fine if he takes off to another team. I don't want to bring him back on a ridiculous uh, contract on a deal.
Yeah, I'm good with. We lost Dave somehow, but show must go on. I think it's love DeMar Hamlin. Like you said, they'll make a movie. I'll go to it. Always going to remember him. But yeah, I think his time here is probably done. Even if they do bring him back, I don't think it'd be for a lot of money, and he wouldn't have a guaranteed starting spot. I think he wants to go
Yeah.
somewhere that he can start. Going to wish him the best, of course. But yeah, I think DeMar's time here is done. I think Bishop played pretty well towards the end last season. Like the more he
agree.
the better he played. Like that Texans game when he started, it was a little questionable. But like the playoff game, I thought he played great. So yeah, I think DeMar probably gone. We roll Rapp Bishop next year, Cam Lewis, draft a guy, sign an affordable guy, and roll into the season like that.
Yeah, Bishop led all players on both on the field and tackles in that AFC title game. I don't think you always want your safety being the leading tackler,
Right.
but
He made a
that's
couple
another
touchdown saving
story.
plays, or is
Yeah.
him by himself on one side of the field, and he made the play. So I'm excited to see what he does in a full off season. Hopefully, he doesn't hurt training camp.
I can't say like where he went from the Texans game until the end of the year. He made strides.
Oh yeah.
I feel like, and sorry about the technical issues, guys. I got rolling blackouts here in California, so I don't know what I missed. But my opinion on DeMar, and I don't know if I cut you guys off or not. And I apologize if I did. I feel like Papa Ron said, like great story. I think he was a great backup here. But like you guys said, like Cole Bishop had 10 tackles, and if that's what we're comparing, like to what we want our safeties to do is just not allow anything over the top and be contained and just try to hold things in front of you. Like I feel like Cole Bishop, we drafted him in the second round. We have to see what he has. And I think Taylor Rapp is going to be here. Is this a position where you go and you get a $2 to $3 million veteran? Sure. You spend a day 3 pick on a safety? Sure. But I think it starts up front. And I definitely think that someone's going to pay DeMar somewhere, I feel like. So, I don't know. So give me 1 second. I gotta plug my computer and give me 1 sec, guys. I'm losing power
You're
now.
good. Yeah, well, we can talk about safeties a little bit, and we'll wait for Dave to get back. Or I guess the secondary in general. So it matter of Bishop and Rapp seem to be pretty locked up. I like what Taylor Rapp does. He just can't seem to stay on the field.
Yeah, that's been a little bit of a concern there as well. And it makes me wonder what the draft might look like too. Because depth, I think, became an issue in the secondary, especially down the stretch.
Yeah, well, hopefully we don't have as many injuries this season as this past season. Even though we were the healthiest
last 3 years.
I know we were the healthiest we've been in a while down the stretch, but getting there wasn't the prettiest.
Just the wrist injuries, that's all.
That's right.
All right, we're back up. We're back on track. We're back on track. So the next portion of the show, we have 4 guys that we're going to talk about for extension candidates. There's a potential 5th guy. We'll see how much time we have left and how much energy the 3 of us have to discuss this, because I do think it's a polarizing topic. There's 2 guys that I feel like Bills Mafia is on one side of the fence or the other on giving extensions to. And we'll do those 2 guys last just to keep it fair. So I put some polls out today on social media, on our Facebook page, and on my X page, seeing, of these four guys, which do you think should be the first extension or is the most important extension? It was between James Cook, Christian Benford, Terrell Bernard, and Khalil Shakir. So I didn't ask the two of these guys which they thought would be their number one preferred guy, but I'm going to ask them right now. So, Scott, who's the most important player of the four I named that needs to get an extension?
For me, it's Christian Benford. He is a true bona fide number one lockdown corner. Doesn't get the respect he probably deserves because his stats aren't crazy. That's just because dudes don't throw at him. Like this past season, his numbers for like completion percentage against, like yards given up, and like per attempt were all right up there with Patrick Surtain. He just doesn't get a lot of interceptions because they don't throw at him. And he was drafted in the 6th round, and he went to Villanova.
Right.
So he isn't, he hasn't been hyped up his whole career. So number one corners like that, or top 5 or top 10, don't grow on trees. They're really hard to find. And we found one, kind of maybe backed into it, kind of like the 49ers and Brock Purdy when they drafted Trey Lance in the 1st round. Then with this guy in the 7th, we drafted Kaiir Elam in the 1st round, and then Christian Benford in the 6th, and got super, super lucky that that they hit it. I'm not saying like John Lynch saved his job doing that with Brock Purdy. I don't think Brandon Beane was in any worry of that. But I think Christian Benford, he's a lockdown corner. Those are really hard to find. And with the receivers in the NFL these days and who we're going to have to continue to play in the playoffs because the Bengals aren't going to be out of the playoffs for much longer, we're going to see Jamar Chase. We're going to see, big time guys. I want Benford, and I want him here for his whole career.
Papa Ron, what do you think, man?
Before I answer the question, I guess to say with Khalil Shakir, for nobody that knows this, I live in the Boise area, so I remember when he was recruited here,
I have a
signed his letter
Shakir
of
Boise
intent.
State jersey.
There you go. I've watched every one of his games. I love him to death. But yeah, like Scott was saying, the Benford is the key guy. You've got to bring him back because you're right; they don't grow on trees. And he's physical. He can cover. Yeah, that's the number one guy. And then if Khalil's listening, sorry, but yeah. Love you, Khalil. But yeah, it's got to be Benford. It's got to be. The way I've always looked at defenses, if you break down the 3 levels of it, the defensive line, linebackers, and secondary. To me, the defensive line is number 1, and then the secondary is number 2. Positionally, you can argue which one is which as far as number 1 corner versus defensive ends or whatever. But if you've got that guy that can log down at least one side of the field the way that Benford can, it makes things so much easier for everybody. So yeah, that's the number 1 guy.
I agree. I've been saying for the last 2 weeks that he's the number 1 priority. Because you don't want to let him wait, because the cornerback market, it's a positional thing, right? Like we talk about positions and money, right? We talk about the quarterbacks make this, the wide receivers make this, and then, oh yeah, by the way, sometimes they pay running backs a little bit. With the defense, the corners are getting paid because, like Ron said, they're going to be matching up against the other team's number 1 target, number 1 skill position player. And I feel like you have to get this done sooner than later because the cornerback contract market is skyrocketing. Corners are getting paid 20+ million a year, and some of these guys deservedly so. So I think if you look at what he was able to do, and me and Scott kind of talked about this before we came on, like nobody throws at him. Like that's what we always used to say about Tre'Davious White. Everybody was like, he's not flashy and he's just a system guy. You can take somebody else and just plug him into the system and McDermott's system, and it just kind of works. Nobody threw at Trey. Like that's why he was nominated for Defensive Player of the Year.
We saw with Elam in the playoff game, that's not true. You can't just throw anybody out there.
Yeah, Elam. So, and the thing with Elam, and I don't want to throw shade at Elam because I supported this guy for 2+ years. I was like, just give him a shot. Just come on, he's physical. He's probably the fastest guy on the team. Like, just give him a chance. He looked great this offseason. Like in training camp, he was making plays. And then you watch the games. Yes, now I understand it's the Kansas City Chiefs. But he just looked lost. Like he couldn't cover, and we were told he was physical. He could be a man cover. He was all these things, and he was just his footwork was horrible. He just looked out of sorts all over the place. So you don't get that with Christian Benford. And we talked earlier about Rasul Douglas and how we think he might have regressed a little bit. Just watching the reactions when Benford makes plays was just by his teammates was just it's infectious. And I feel like he's part of that underdog culture mentality, and he's got a motor on him, and he's got the heart and the drive and desire, and I feel like he's going to become one of those alpha guys on the defense. I just feel like it's there. It's going to come out, and I feel like he deserves to get paid, and I'm okay with the Bills paying him 20 plus million a year. I really am. And that I might be in a boat all by myself in the middle of the ocean, but I'm okay paying him, 4 years, 80 mil. I'm okay doing that because I have looked at the last 2 years' body of work and nothing has changed. He's been a shutdown corner. He's been in the top of all the categories as far as opposing QB rating and what he does on third down and covering, on in the red zone, whatever you want to break it, however you want to break it down. I just feel like he's that guy. So what do you guys think contract wise? And Scott, I'll go with you first.
20 mil is a lot. But that's what number one corners get these days. So
yeah,
I'm sure that they'll hope he takes some kind of hometown discount, but he won't because most guys don't. So it's going to be a lot. I think it's going to be right around 20 million, probably 4, maybe 5 years, and Bean's a cap wizard with how he works them all out. So I'm sure there'll be signing bonuses and restructures and things throughout it. But yeah, he probably gets somewhere around 20 million, or hopefully the fact that he doesn't have any accolades and no one really talks about him, kind of similar, probably going to make Terrell Bernard. Maybe that keeps his number a little lower, but I doubt that it will because if you watch the film, he's that good. So yeah, right around 20 million, hopefully under.
I mean, how much did they pay Trey? I don't remember his exact contract.
I'll look it up.
Unfortunately, it stinks what happened to Trey and his 2 devastating injuries, but I'm pretty sure he was like 15, 16, 17 mil.
4 for 69.
Yeah, so I mean,
17.
This is only 10 million more, and the market has gone up. So inflation, I guess.
Yeah.
Ron, what do you think contract wise?
I think Christian Benford's one of those guys you got to throw the money at him and get him to stay. He's instrumental to this team. I said last year when we played the stupid Chiefs in the divisional, I felt like if Benford played that game, then we would have won. You could also say the same about Terrell Bernard in that game. So both of those guys just doomed us. But 20 million. Let's do it. Get him back over here.
I just pulled it up. If we give him 20 million, that would make him the 6th highest paid corner behind Ramsey, Surtain, Alexander, AJ Terrell, and Denzel Ward.
Is he the 6th best corner in the league? Again, he doesn't have all the accolades. He doesn't have the interceptions and fumble returns and all this stuff because he doesn't get picked on, and that speaks for itself. If he's getting targeted 7, 8 times a game and he's giving up 4 or 5 receptions and 50, 60, 75 yards, then we can start talking, even if he's not giving up the touchdowns and stuff like that. But he's not giving up anything. That's the thing.
Right.
Like, I think the worst game he had this year was probably 70 yards, maybe 85 yards, something like that. And I think it was the Rams game when the entire Bills defense got cooked that game. So,
and again, as we learned with quarterbacks, it doesn't necessarily have to be a top 5 person to get that money. It's just a matter of in what order you get paid. So is he worth being paid in that? And then by the time his contract's end, he'll probably be the 20th highest paid quarterback in the NFL. It won't be so bad.
And that's why I'm saying we do it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And again, we don't know what Brandon Beane thinks of Christian Benford. Like, he probably holds him close to the chest because he was a 6th-round pick that he found and drafted, and he's turned into the guy that we thought Kaiir Elam was going to be. So, I don't know. But I think it needs to happen. And a lot of people are saying that he should not be number one priority because they don't look at the way a lot of people are talking about, and I'll just bring the next guy up right now. A lot of people are talking about this guy should be the number one priority because he's the Mike, right? So he's the quarterback of the defense. But to me, and I think all 3 of us have touched on how the defense flows. I feel like the defensive line is first and foremost. The secondary is the second most. and then the linebackers kind of fill in between. And a lot of people are probably not going to agree with that take because there's 3 levels to the defense and they think that's how it works. But we've been spoiled with, up until this past season, we were spoiled with amazing all-pro safety play that might have had our corners might have benefited from that. So anyone can say, well, Christian Benford had Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer back there, making sure that he was in position to do the right things and this and that. Well, those guys weren't there this year, and he played just as good, if not better, than he did last year. So that's why I think he warrants that. But we'll move on to Terrell Bernard. Papa Ron, you're up first, man. What's your thoughts on Terrell Bernard and importance of giving him an extension?
I'd put him number 2 behind uh, behind Benford. One of the things that I like to do in my spare time. So started watching the Bills in 1988, and back then I lived in New Mexico. No professional teams, so the only teams we got to watch were Dallas, the Raiders, Cardinals. So I didn't see a lot of Bills games. So now with the YouTube, there's tons of Bills games on there. So I go back, hop on the treadmill in the morning, put on a 1988 Week 6 game. One of the things that I noticed watching those games is the Bills defensive line. They were tremendous, and it allowed the linebackers to do their thing, to run around. So that to me is that's a big reason why if your defensive line is stout, if they're solid, it makes everybody so much better. It keeps the blockers off of the linebackers. So I think a lot of what our linebackers do is dependent on how good the defensive line is. Terrell Bernard, he has shown a knack for making the play, and that's one of the things that people got on with Tremaine Edmonds so much. He's like they never see splash plays from him. We see that from Bernard, and I think what I worry about with Bernard though is if they don't do an extension this summer, then there's a very good chance he probably hits free agency, and then somebody's going to throw a ton of money at him, just like they did with Edmonds. So if you can get him locked up this summer, I think that would be key. So yeah, it's Benford and then Bernard for me.
What about you, Scott?
I would put Bernard probably behind Shakir in my hierarchy, but I think he's a guy you most likely bring back. He's a weird one because we watch the Bills closer than most people and closer than most analysts. I would probably all national analysts, probably closer than even some Bills analysts. And if you watch the game, he is a lot of times the best player on our defense. He has a nose for the football, which I know is cliche, but he really does. Like he's always in the right spot. He's always punching it out. He's making interceptions. Like you said, Tremaine Edmonds and stuff we would beg him to do. Bernard accidentally falls backwards, flails his arm, and knocks the ball out on an accident sometimes. But he if you look like his PFF grades, which take all of those with a grain of salt, it's not great. Like none of the analysts talk about him like he's a good player. A lot of his analytics aren't that good. If all the nerd stats out there that old school football people don't like. But if you watch the games, it's like he's everywhere. So his contract is like puzzling to me because it seems like he could be worth 10, 11, 12 million, but I think they can get him for cheaper. Like if they can get him around 8 or 9 million for a longer term extension, maybe that as the contract goes on, it gets up to 10, 11, because we're paying Milano 14 mil a year. He's the 4th highest paid linebacker in the NFL. There's about 10 guys making 10 mil a year. Is Bernard a top 10 linebacker in the league? No. So they can get him, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 million. I think that's a pretty team friendly deal. Again, durability is questionable with him, but he's usually on the field when he wants to be, and there's no question in his heart how much he wants it. So I would extend him, and I'm just real interested to see what the number is, just because how skewed the analytics versus the eye test are with him.
Yeah, I think he's getting extended. I think there's no question. You know why? Because he was one of the Bills' 2 captains this year, and that shows what he does in the locker room, what he means to Sean McDermott. And I think Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane are in lockstep when it comes to, hey, who do you want to be your Mike linebacker for the next 7 years? A guy that we all, I know I did, going into the beginning of last season, I was scared of who our middle linebacker was going to be. It was Terrell Dotson or it was Terrell Bernard. I think we were all concerned, and we watched him play and we're like, holy shit. Like this guy's got a motor. This guy is good in coverage. This guy blows up plays in the run game. Like he's all, like you said, he's all over the field, and he plays with, like his hair's on fire. I know that's cliche, but I think what'll help the Bills is that when you see all these national pundits talking about linebackers, and if there's ever a Bills mentioned in there, it's Matt Milano, right? So he's kind of, I don't want to say he's Matt Milano's sidekick, but he's playing alongside Matt Milano. So I think there might be some negotiations about, hey, we've paired you guys together. How good is one without the other? We don't necessarily know if you are better than Milano without Milano out there. You know what I'm saying? And I know Milano's missed a chunk of time and Terrell's played great, but like you said, he doesn't get like Christian Benford. Like nobody talks about it. Like unless it's that game that those national media guys are watching, like nobody says, how many interceptions he has or forced fumbles, like the game against the Ravens. Like they're like, oh, Terrell Bernard punched the ball out of Mark Andrews' hands. Like, so I think that bodes well for Brandon Beane. And I do think that he might be a guy that will be willing to come down a little bit to stay here. I think he loves it here. I think he loves the culture. I think he loves the coaching staff. I know McDermott he talks about him, to the moon and back all the time. So it'll be interesting, but I definitely think he gets extended for sure. He definitely deserves it. So I think that needs to happen before the season starts, because you can't let him play without a deal. Because like Papa Ron said, he's going to go if he balls out, he's going to go into the offseason and be like, I want to get paid. And then the price tag only goes up from there. All right. So we were talking about our guy, Khalil Shakir. So Papa Ron, I'll let you go first on Khalil Shakir, since, you're in the land of where he's played college football. So what you take?
Obviously I hope he stays. There was a tight end. I don't know if you guys remember, maybe 10, 15 years ago, Derek Schumann. He was a guy from Boise State as well, and I got super excited when he went to Buffalo. It's so much fun when your college guys go to your NFL team. I hope he sticks around. But the reason why I put him number 3 is, and I hate to say this, but I feel like the wide receiver position, the way it is today, is so much easier to replace than especially with corner. There's lots of guys coming out of college that can play the slot position. I mean, we heard it all last year. Well, I really like this receiver. Well, he's only a slot guy. Lad McConkey was a good example. I loved McConkey going through the draft process. He was one of my favorite guys. Wanted Buffalo to get him, but everybody told me, "Oh, he's a slot guy. He won't work." It seems like seems to be a position that most of these receivers coming out of college can play. If they're not a boundary guy, they can do slot. So I think it's an easier position to fill. And as good as he is, the way they spread the ball around, the production, it was okay. I know he had 100 targets. I can't remember receptions. It was 70, 70, 75, something like that. Didn't have 1,000 yards. I think 4 touchdowns. So the production wasn't outrageous. So it's a position, like I said, I think we can replace if we need to. That said, with my heart, I hope he comes back. I would love to see him finish play out his whole career in Buffalo.
Scott, what do you think, man?
Yeah, I know he is easy. A receiver is a decently easy to replace position, and the slot maybe a little bit easier. But I think he's just such a big part of what this offense does. Maybe the worst game of Josh Allen's entire career came this year against the Texans. You know who didn't play? Khalil Shakir. He's the safety blanket. He's really the only receiver we had who can get separation. I know that that's not going to be the same as years go on, but I don't think his extension is going to be that crazy big, especially because, like you said, he only plays the slot, and he had 600 yards, I think, last year, 800 something yards this year. Hit his over. I had that bet. That was nice. But I think they can get him for a pretty affordable deal. I think Josh loves him, and I think he's the most consistent part of the offense, and he fits into what they like to do, which is across the middle of the field, the screens. Obviously, Joe Brady's not going to be around forever, but he fits in perfect for that kind of scheme. And it also seems to be the scheme that McDermott wants to do. Like you made the point earlier, Dave, of McDermott's, he's a defensive-minded coach. He wants to run the ball. He wants to control time of possession. And we had Dable and Ken Dorsey, who were like the polar opposite of that. So I'm imagining the offensive coordinator after Brady will be similar. So I think he'll fit into the offense for years to come. And I think he's Josh's favorite target, and I don't see him wanting him to go anywhere. So I think he's back, and I don't think his deal is crazy.
Yeah, I think he's very affordable. Because if you match him up against some of the top slot receivers, he's comparable as if you look at some of the metrics like drop rate, um, target share, stuff like that. He's very comparable in that. But the Bills don't. He's not going to ever be that guy where he's going to get 12, 13 targets in a game. He's just not. He's going to be that guy that's going to get 5 to 7 targets. They're going to be impactful plays. They're going to be dialed up. And I don't know what it is, but Joe Brady loves throwing the bubble screen to Khalil Shakir. It works. We complained about it. I bitched about it when it wasn't working in certain games this year. But he's a guy he's just like he's slippery. You can't tackle him. He's elusive. He makes plays when there's nothing it looks like to be made. And I don't think he's going to break the bank. And I think that, and I hate to say he's a 5th-round guy because I know that there's receivers that are, day 3 picks that, have gone into the Hall of Fame, but he's a day 3 guy that I don't think is going to warrant a ton of money. And if they bring him back or if he gets extended, if you get 5 more years of Khalil Shakir having 75 receptions and 850 yards, I think we'd all be okay with that, as long as the price tag that goes along with it is okay.
I think that's.
So
I was going to add that's probably like the key with all of these guys. Honestly, I think
yeah,
most of them, if not all, come back. But it's the price tag.
right.
If it fits and it works, great.
Yeah, and like I just feel like when Cole Beasley was here, he was that guy that I don't think we ever really wanted him to have 1,000 yards. It would have been cool to have him get 1,000 yards, but we wanted him to get the ball when it was 3rd and 7, right? And I feel like that's where they need to build around what they have receiver wise to where Shakir can be that 3rd and 7 guy, 3rd and 6 guy.
Yep.
Because I don't want Dalton Kincaid to be that guy. I want Khalil Shakir to be that guy because he's tried and true. He's been there, he's done it, and he's the most consistent receiver the Bills have had the last season and a half. So I don't know. I think it'll be interesting. I don't know if they're going to do it this offseason. I hope they do. And I think he'd love to be back, extended for a few years. All right. Last one. And I think this might be one where we're going to all have some different opinions here. So James Cook. I'm going to go last because I just feel like I could go on for 20 minutes on this guy. So, Scott, I'll start with you on James Cook. We all saw the antics this past week on social media with the scrubbing of his Instagram account. There's like 4 Bills posts on there. He unfollowed the team and all the players. He posted that Instagram Live that he wants $15 million. Then like 2 days later, he posted an hourglass on his story. So what do you make of all that, and what's your thoughts on giving James Cook an extension here, Scott?
I am generally in the camp of not paying running backs a lot of money, but the NFL is kind of coming back around to running the ball more. Look at the Eagles with Saquon. Look with the Bills, like the 2 best offenses in the Ravens, probably the 3 best offenses in the NFL, all run more than they pass the ball, all have a big time running back. So it's kind of regressing back to the mean, I guess, from when it was, 3-4 years ago when the Bills go a whole half of the playoff game without having a designed run to a running back. Like those days are gone. I would not give him $15 million. That is crazy. But hey, in the words of Michael Scott and Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. You got to ask for 15, and then they come back and offer 8, and then you meet in the middle somewhere around 11 or 12. I think that's probably what happens. I think that the Bills want him there. I think they see the offense going through him. I could honestly see them having a bigger discretion on the number of years versus the money, because I think they'll find a spot for the money. But you don't want to give a running back a ton of years because, as history shows, after they go couple years past their prime, they fall off a cliff unless you're Derrick Henry. He's just a freak. But we complain that James Cook doesn't play a lot of snaps. In the extension world and him having a long career and longevity, it kind of helps that he doesn't play 50% of the snaps. Even back to college, he didn't play 50% of the snaps. So he's not a kind of feature back that has a lot of miles on him. So if there was a running back that you would want to extend, it's that kind of guy. He showed he's more physical this year. I need to see him get better at pass blocking, because that's the reason he's not the 3rd down back. It's not as much to do with that he has catching issues. He fixed that for the most part this season, but you don't trust him to block. They trust Ty Johnson to block. They don't trust him to block. If you're going to give a guy 10, 11, 12 million dollars, you want him to be an every down back, and I don't know that he's that yet. So he needs some development. I think they probably end up bringing him back, but not going to be at 15 million, probably somewhere closer to 10, 11, 12.
Ron, what do you think, man?
I think I'm largely in the same camp. If the money's right, I'm fine with it. But I go back to what I said earlier about the offensive line. I think that's the bigger part of all of this. I did a little exercise a few days ago and took Ray Davis's averages and projected them based on Cook's workload. And the difference was less than 100 yards, and Davis had more receptions. The touchdowns was the biggest difference. I believe it was 18 versus 11. But we know touchdowns go up and down. Cook isn't going to get 18 touchdowns every year. That's not how this works. So I think a large part of the production of the run game is because of that offensive line, and because of the fact that he's not an every down back. I don't want to pay him like he is one. So if he's willing to, go with the 9, 10 million range, whatever, by all means, let's do it. I don't have a problem with him getting paid. Some of us old school guys, I don't like the way he's going about it. I can't stand that, especially when you've got four other guys that have outplayed their rookie deals and are deserving of a contract. You don't see them out there being loud and making all the noise either. But if the money's right, 9, 10 million, I'm okay with it. If they choose to move on, or I've even seen some people talk about trade, then so be it.
All right. So, and this will, I'll wrap a bow on I'm probably going to be all over the place, but it'll all come full circle, I promise. So, I'm with you guys. I don't like the new age way of negotiating with these mostly football players about how, like we saw Stephon Diggs did in Minnesota, and then obviously the stuff that came out with him, behind the scenes stuff that he was doing here. I don't like that he's doing all this stuff with the 15 million. I was surprised. First and foremost, I was surprised that James Cook was doing an Instagram live. Like, I don't think any of us have ever seen the guy talk for more than 30 seconds. But I don't like the fact that he's got his brother in his ear. He's got his agent in his ear. And to me, there's a culture fit. And I think that he is a culture fit, but I think that he just took a hit on the culture fit when it comes to McDermott and when it comes to being now. With that being said, Sean McDermott was gushing about James Cook when the season ended. He talked a ton about he makes plays, he puts his head down, he gets the tough yards. He was any word you can use to preach about how great James Cook was. Sean McDermott was doing that. He doesn't do that often. Sean McDermott doesn't single guys out a lot. He just doesn't. That's not his style. Now, is he going to get 15 million? No. I don't think he's going to get 15 million here. I don't think he's going to get traded and get extended for 15 million no matter where he goes. He's not Derrick Henry and he's not Saquon Barkley. He's just not. Did he have a nice season? Yes, but he barely had 1,000 yards. Did he have a bunch of touchdowns? Yes. But like Papa Ron said, the Bills' offensive line and the six man that they put out there more than any team in the league is a huge part of being able to have a running back like James Cook. Now, James Cook showed me a lot this year with his vision and his toughness. There was some tough yards that he got. That play, the touchdown against the Chiefs, like how he was able to extend and contort his body and do all that stuff, that was grit. Like that, you can't teach that. That is determination. I'm going to score. With that being said, I feel like the Bills are going to, like we touched on earlier, I feel like the Bills may uptick even more of the run game this coming season. Number one, you saw a different version of Josh Allen this year. You saw a more controlled, poised, take high percentage, low risk, high reward passes, which led to his most statistically efficient season of his career. And that's no coincidence with the running game being as good as it is. That's a Joe Brady thing. And Joe Brady's going to be here calling plays this year. And like I said, this is going to be long-winded, but I'm going to get to my point. I think this offense is tied to James Cook a little bit. I feel like a lot of what they want to do is tied to James Cook. Now, Scott talked about the fourth quarter and why wasn't James Cook out there? Why was Ty Johnson out there in the last 3 minutes? Well, all year the Bills did that, and that's what they wanted to do. They didn't want to get away from who they were. But in the second half, when the Bills started moving the ball after we watched the first half of just, dysfunctional offense, it was getting James Cook involved. He was making plays. And I think he's a huge part of what they want to do this coming season, but not for $15 million. I feel like if you pay James Cook $12 million, you better give him 20 carries a game because that's what you're paying for. You're paying a guy $12 million to get 9 carries. No, you can't do that. You're going to have to involve him like he's a number one back. And I don't know if that's the style offense they're going to run. So I'm torn as to where it's going to fall. And I'm torn as if they should rinse and repeat with the position like they did with so many backs that they had in the past that they didn't seem like they warranted a second contract. Now, James Cook is not Devin Singletary. James Cook is not Zach Moss. James Cook's better than both of those guys. One guy was traded to the Bengals, and one guy's they let walk in free agency. So it's tough. I don't know. And I think this is the hard thing. We have never seen Brandon Beane do this, right? This is the first time that we're having a conversation about Brandon Beane extending a running back because he didn't do that, right? He likes to draft and fill with veteran for number 2 and number 3s. So now he's got 2 young guys on both on rookie deals and then Ty Johnson. So it's all about what Brandon Beane wants to do. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but I wouldn't give him more than 10 to 12 mil, maybe a 3-year deal with a 4th year that's voided, something like that. But it's going to be tough. Do I want him here? Yes. I feel like James Cook is a huge part of this offense. I like the guy. I think that he's, what he's been able to do this season, being able to get the long touchdown runs, and the knock on him was he wasn't able to find the end zone. We put that to bed. So it's going to be interesting. So anything else you guys want to say? I do think we can spend a couple minutes on one more guy that everybody seems to kind of start talking about as far as an extension. Anything else you guys want to put a bow on James Cook? I know I went long there.
It's going to be interesting.
The only thing I was thinking about when you mentioned the McDermott comments is I wonder how McDermott felt making those comments, and then a day or two later,
Exactly.
Cook goes on these antics. I mean, it's almost like a slap in the face. Hey, thanks for the compliments. Now pay up, and I'm going to let the world know I wanted money. It rubbed me the wrong way, and I'm sure it did a lot of other people. But yeah, at the end of the day, the offense does revolve around him, I think. But he does, if they're going to do that, yeah, more carries for sure, more involvement.
All right, let's talk about Greg Rousseau. Because the Bills picked up his 5th-year option, which I believe is a little over $13 million just for this year. That shows to me, and I'll let you guys go first. That shows to me that they, in the way Brandon Beane said it in his presser when it was asked last, when they did it, he was like, "Yeah, of course we did. Why wouldn't we?" Now I know $13 million for an edge rusher in this day and age, which is basically they're warranting a top 10 edge defender is warranting quarterback-esque type money, big contracts. Obviously not 40, 50, 60 million, but they're going to be the highest paid. If you get a stud, he's going to be the highest paid player on your defense. That's just how it works right now. But picking up his option as quickly as they did kind of leads me down the road that they're going to give him an extension. And Papa Ron, I'll go to you first. What are your thoughts? Do you think that he'll get an extension, and do you think that the Bills should give him an extension?
Yes and yes. I mentioned at the beginning of the show that there's 3 guys on this defensive line that can stay. Solomon, Oliver, and Russo is one of them. And part of it is because I do feel like he is a good player, right? I mean, he's one of the better run defenders in the league at that position. The pressures were there. But you have so many other issues on this defensive line that he's one of those guys that just leave him there, leave him alone. Let's focus on this other side. I think if you can go out and you can get somebody who's dominant on the other side, it's going to make things so much easier for Rousseau. And then maybe he does get 10, 11 sacks a season at that. Maybe this is a pipe dream. I don't know. Maybe this is another conversation of the day. But if we can get a Max Crosby or Miles Garrett, on that other side, it would do wonders for Rousseau, and I think you would see more of those pressures becoming sacks. I just to me, he's not the problem necessarily. I know we had a terrible game against the Chiefs in that title game. Most of the defense did, in my opinion, especially the defensive line. But he's not the problem. So it's kind of one of those things where you look at the big issue. What's causing the majority of the problem, and that's what you're going to look at, and he's just not it. And so I think the Bills do extend him, and I think they should. What that money
Scott,
looks like, I have no clue.
Scott, what do you think, man?
I don't know if they do. I agree that he's not the problem, but I also don't know if he's a big part of the solution. He disappears at times. And what do you have? 8 sacks this season, and 3 of them were in week 1 against the Cardinals. And it was like awesome. Like, this is the guy. And
Right.
then it was where'd he go? I don't remember him making a ton of like big sacks in big moments. He's not necessarily a dominant pass rusher, a la Von Miller, a Miles Garrett, a Max Crosby. But we knew that when we drafted him. A lot of his sacks in Miami actually came when he played on the inside, and they'd put him in there on third down, but the quarterback would just kind of like step up into him, and there he was. He's great against the run. Like, I agree with that, but so was Shaq Lawson. I'm not saying he's Shaq Lawson, but like Shaq Lawson was also good against the run. We paid him $2 million. We're in one of those spots where I don't think they're going to give him an extension this offseason because I think they have higher priorities, like some of the guys we talked about earlier. And I think they want to see more from him. And if we get that more from him next year, then that number probably gets higher than we're comfortable going, because some team like the Raiders or the Titans or the Jaguars will give him $18 million a year to go there and, try to take it to the next level. And maybe he will. And if he has a year like he has the years past, then it kind of justifies not extending him. And it's okay, yeah, this is his ceiling. We're not going to give a guy 13, 14, 15, $16 million to be a really good run defender and an average pass rusher. So I feel like he might be one of those guys that plays out his rookie deal and then goes somewhere else. He'll get a big contract somewhere, I think, because he has the potential. I just don't know if it's here.
Yeah, when I think of Greg Rousseau, I think of Tremaine Edmonds. Extremely young, very raw coming out of the draft. Like, felt like he was just this physical specimen that was going to be able to be molded over time into this elite pass rusher. The wingspan, the run defense has always been there. I think a lot of stuff was technique coming out of college, coming out of Miami. I think a lot of it was, what's his technique? Like, it seems like for a guy with such long arms and as tall as he is, he kind of gets pushed around a little bit. He's going to make 13 plus mil this year on his 5th-year deal. Right. And or his 5th-year option. If he goes out there, 2 things could happen. He's going to go out there and he's going to be Greg Rousseau. And this is Greg Rousseau's ceiling, right? He's going to get 8.5 sacks. He's going to be really good against the run. He's not going to be a huge difference maker, or as Bean likes to call these guys, game wreckers, right? He's not. And then you could probably bring him back, right? You probably bring him back on a 3 or 4 year deal, and he'd be a rotational piece with AJ Epinesa and, whoever else. Or he's going to go out there and have 14 sacks. He's going to be a Pro Bowler. He's going to look amazing, and he's going to price himself out of Buffalo. He's going to have the Tremaine Edmonds syndrome all over again, where the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to give him $24 million a year, which right now, Spot Track, take it for what it's worth, has him at $23 million a year as market value. So my question to both of you guys is, what are you willing to pay Greg Rousseau? If he has the same year he has, say he gets to double digits and gets to 10 sacks, but everything else kind of stays the same. We see him kind of fluctuate throughout the season. He has some good moments here and there. Hopefully has a better postseason. What kind of a contract do you think he deserves? Because, like we talked about, defensive ends are they're gonna warrant a ton of money. Slightly above average defensive ends, I feel like you see these guys sign in the offseason that are on their 9th team in 9 years, and they're getting $14 million, $15 million because they had one good year 3 years ago. Like, I don't know. He's not Miles Garrett. He's not Max Crosby. He's not TJ Watt. He's not Trey Hendrickson. So what's he worth to you guys? Like, what's a contract to bring back Greg Rousseau next season?
$23 million's a lot.
That's what's in spot rack's been up. Then they're kind of all over the place, but there's defensive ends out there making more than 23 million, but they're the guys that I mentioned. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 23 is like right around. Max Crosby actually makes 23 million. Josh Hines makes 28 million. Yeah, depends. If he has a year like a Greg Rousseau year, like you said, 8 sacks, good against the run, not a ton of splash plays, just like a solid defensive end, I feel like 15 million maybe ceiling wise, but he's going to want more than that on the open market, which is why I probably don't think they bring him back, because some team will give him a lot more than that, as we saw with some of the other numbers. And then at that point, you draft a guy and just kind of go at it again and get 4-5 more years of a rookie contract. I feel like that's probably the better answer.
I think a lot of this depends on if Brandon Beane steps up to the plate and tries to take a swing. I think a lot of what happens with Greg Rousseau is, and that might be part of why he doesn't. We don't know that. But if he goes and tries to get a Max Crosby or Myles Garrett and one of these guys, maybe that's the signal right there, because you obviously can't pay 2 guys, but maybe that's the sign right there. And maybe that brings a better version of Greg Rousseau out. I don't know. I'm not paying this guy more than $15 to $16 million a year. I think his rookie deal and his 5th-year option for 13, I don't know the exact number. I know it's a little north of 13 million for 8.5 sacks. Like, I feel like that's AJ Epinesa type stuff. Now, I understand. I'm not saying that Rousseau is AJ Epinesa. I'm just saying, like, they went out and they paid AJ to get 6.5 sacks, right? And be a rotational guy. Are we paying Groot $15 million for 8.5 sacks, 9 sacks, and really good against the run? Like, does that make sense? Like, long term? Ron, what do you think?
I think 15 would be fair. Ideally, you can get him on maybe a year or 2 extension or an incentive laden deal. Say, look, you go out next year, you ball out, you get us 14 sacks. Then we'll extend you, the 3-4 year deal that you're looking for. Because what I don't want to happen is for him to go out this coming season and have a huge year, and then we can't bring him back because then we can't afford it. I
Right.
don't want that to happen because sure, we can go and draft a guy, but we've been drafting guys and it's not working. And he's probably honestly the best of any defensive end that we've drafted over in McBean's time. So I worry about not trying to keep him at least for extended maybe for a year or two. I'm almost like a prove it couple of seasons, and then if he does ball out, then reward him for that. Because yeah, like I said, there's been a rotating door of defensive ends, and I don't like the rotation. We talked about that earlier. It drives me nuts. I think your best 4 guys need to be out there majority of the time. And if that's the case, he probably is a double-digit sack guy, right?
Yeah, I mean, if he gets more snaps, he's potentially. I've said it for a long time. Like, a lot of people dog AJ Epinesa. I just feel like he's never been put in a position to be successful. I'm not saying AJ Epinesa is better than Greg Rousseau. I'm not here to say that. That's not what I'm saying. I used this analogy back in September. I was on a live show with Dan Fates from Buffalo Plus, and I said Greg Rousseau is the Gabe Davis of the Bills defense. There's times when you're like, holy shit, like the Arizona game. And then there's times when you're like, where is Greg Rousseau? Like, why is the Chiefs game? And I'm going to go on a rant for him. The Chiefs game. How many times was Greg Rousseau on the ground? Bro, you have a 96-inch wingspan. Nobody should be touching you off of your get off when the ball is snapped. Like, you should be able to push these guys around. And we saw it this year when he was able to be just physically dynamic against opposing offensive linemen. And then there was times when we would play teams with an average to below average offensive line, and you're thinking, okay, Rousseau's going to eat, and he just didn't. Now, say what you want, if it's the rotation, if it was they weren't lining him up wherever, Vaughn's not doing shit, AJ's not doing shit, so he's getting double teamed, whatever it is. But I feel like, and this is the final on this. I feel like you ride out this season, and if he has a dynamic season where he goes bananas and he prices himself out of Buffalo, it happens. That's what they did with Tremaine Edmonds. They let him play out his 5th year, and what did he do? He went bananas. He gave us all the splash plays that we were waiting for. He gave us the interceptions and the All Pro and all that stuff. So it sucks because we want these guys to be successful, and I'm sure Bean wants all his guys, especially first rounders, because the track record is not looking super great right now on first rounders. I'm sure he wants him to be successful, and I'm sure he wants him to go out there and have 15 sacks. But if he does, we can't bring him back. So it's like we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. So I don't know. Anything else you guys want to add on that? We're just about out of time. We're going to get out of here pretty soon. Anything else you guys wanted to say before we go?
Yeah, I was going to say, so he played 71% of the snaps last season, and that's with a 0 against the Patriots because he was active but didn't play, and then only 41 against the Jets in Week 17. So it's like it's not like he's not getting snaps. Like 71%, like you look at guys right around him, Cameron Hayward, DeForest Buckner just above him, Leonard Williams just below him, Neil Henner just below him. Like he's getting a lot of snaps. Like it's not like he's playing 50%. Like he's getting the snaps, doesn't have crazy production. Like he's right in the range of like all the other top guys except for Max Crosby, who just doesn't leave the field. Like he's right in there with everybody else.
I think the Chiefs game turned a lot of people off because his comments didn't help his stance at all when he came out and said they were running stuff we had no idea.
Never seen it before. Yeah.
So I don't really think that helps his cause. But again, that's not just on him. That's on McDermott and Babbage and stuff like that. So
that's Andy Reid.
Exactly. But then they go play Philly and they look like they don't know. They're a high school offense. Like they don't know what the hell they're doing. It's so frustrating. So frustrating. Papa Ron, anything else before we get out of here, brother?
No, I think we pretty much covered it.
Yeah, I think this was a great show. Again, the first time the three of us have done anything freelance like this. Scott's on Friday nights, currently Friday nights, on Triple Coverage Podcast. Papa Ron, he's been doing a lot of shorts and reels and all kinds of videos for us, and you will see him doing a lot more stuff. Hopefully, me and him will have some stuff going and cooking too. Off season's cooking. League year is less than 3 weeks away, I think now. So it's going to be getting hot and heavy.
Crazy.
Salary cap just went up. A lot of stuff heating up as far as edge defenders wanting to get out of where they're at and come to a winner. And thank God for Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott turning us into a perennial every year. We're talked about in these places because we are one of the contenders every single year. So got to love that. Hot take. I think that either Myles Garrett or Max Crosby will be a Buffalo Bill by the time training camp starts. That's my hot take. So
who would you prefer?
Max Crosby.
Same. What about you, Scott?
It's kind of like picking your favorite kid. I don't have any, but I can imagine that's hard.
You don't even have any kids. How do you know how that works? This is my favorite cousin over here.
I lean Myles Garrett, honestly. I think he's the better raw pass rusher. I know he's a little older, maybe not quite as good against the run, but realistically, like if they make that trade, that means we're going for it right now. And I think right now, Myles Garrett is the better player, better pass rusher, and that's what they need.
I think would I like to have Myles Garrett over Max Crosby? Yes. I think the more attainable guy is Max Crosby because he has not yet publicly come out and said, I want to be traded. I don't think he's going to warrant as many draft capital or players currently on the team. So that's why I think, plus he's younger. I mean, and I feel like Max Crosby is a guy who is a vibe. He's like Mac Hollins, right? I think he's a guy because we don't have those guys. Ed Oliver, I guess, on defense that would come in and just kind of slap guys on the head and be like, let's fucking go. Like, this is the playoffs. Like, we need to make a stop. Like, we need to get a sack. Like, I don't know. I just feel like Myles Garrett's like there's no one else like him in the NFL. Yeah. Obviously, he was last year's Defensive Player of the Year, and I think he's a game wrecker. I just don't know what it's going to cost. Plus, there's a lot of crap coming out that they're going to try to throw Deshaun Watson in there just to get off the contract, or just get him out of the building. I've seen a lot of like reputable sources saying that the Browns
that
could
too.
possibly add Deshaun Watson as part of the deal to make it less of, well, you give us 3 firsts or 2 firsts or whatever, because the team has to take him on. So it's like, oh yeah, by the way, you get him as well. So, but it's going to be interesting. I feel like one of those guys is going to be on the Bills. I feel like Brandon Beane is sick of losing to the Chiefs. I think he's sick of getting bullied by the Chiefs. He watched the Eagles punch the Chiefs in the face, which is funny because the 2 times the Bills have lost to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship, the team that beat the Chiefs did what the Eagles did. They punched Patrick Mahomes in the face. And Brandon Beane tried to do that in the 2021 draft. It didn't work. He went out and got Von Miller. Obviously, unfortunately, that didn't work. So it's the time. It is time. Go get a guy. It's time. I don't care what you have to do. The salary cap is not real. I don't care what you say. It's not real. Make it work. Fix it. Figure it out later. Push shit down the road. I don't care. Just you have to do it. I think that if we had one of those edge defenders, we would not have lost to the Chiefs.
Agreed.
I don't know what that game against the Eagles would look like, but I don't think if we had Max Crosby and Myles Garrett, yeah, I mean and I feel like Josh Allen is a different quarterback against the Eagles than Patrick Mahomes was. If you think I'm friggin' Looney Tunes for saying that, the Bills' offensive style was so much better prepared to play against that Eagles team than the Chiefs were. So that's just me. I mean, I could be crazy.
And we have a better offensive line.
Exactly, 100%, 100%.
The thing I like with Crosby is he loves to get under Mahomes' skin. Like you watch those the highlights. He loves to get under his skin.
Keeps running by him and clapping him, and he's like, "Come on, man!" Yeah. So, anyways, that's going to be it for us, guys. Keep up to date with what we're doing at Built in Buffalo. As you guys see, if you want to follow us all on X, it's all right there. Papa Ron, what's your handle on X, brother?
It's my name at Ronnie Easton.
There we go. There we go. All right, follow what we're doing. We're going to have some draft coverage coming out. We have a scouting department here in Built in Buffalo. Those guys are putting some stuff together. Obviously, free agency is my Christmas, so I'm going to start popping out more videos, more graphics, more stuff talking about who I think is an actual option for the Bills, with us being in salary cap hell right now. So that's going to be coming out. And just hit the notification bell if you're watching this. Hit like wherever you're watching, Facebook, X, on YouTube. Subscribe, do all that good stuff. That's going to be it for us. Guys, want to take us out with a Go Bills?
Go Bills.
Go Bills.